here we have a statement that says any segment, line, or plane that intersects a segment at its midpoint is called a segment bisector. In the figure, M is the midpoint of line segment PQ. Now, in geometry, we have a lot of different terminologies and symbols. It's kind of like a language in itself. And so we're going to have to remember and learn how to understand what we're reading. So for example, this blue picture right here, we call it a plane, and it's basically a flat surface. So I want you guys to remember that a plane is not something necessarily that you fly on, but it's a flat, any flat surface, kind of like your desk. And we name it with a capital letter, so you can see that right here. Here it says that we have a line segment MJ. Now, if you notice, we name a line segment. It has a starting point and an ending point. And we name it with its endpoints, and at the top, we use a symbol of just a line segment as such. We also have a line, and what is a line? A line is basically a line segment extended, and it's got arrows. And we also use 2 points on the line to name it. So this would be a line segment, and KM at the top, we're going to use arrows to show that it's a line, and this is what we in geometry say is a line. Also, points, we already know, are named with capital letters, and we also have another line segment PQ. So now that we understand the terminology and the words, let's read this and understand where and what is a segment bisector. So for example, it says plane A, line segment MJ, and line KM, and point M are all bisectors of the line segment PQ. That means they're all cutting, and I'm going to highlight the line segment that's being cut. So this PQ is being cut in half by all of these different things. The plane is cutting it in half, the line is cutting it in half, and the line segments are cutting it in half. Okay? So it's important that you understand the terminology. All right, so now let's do some examples understanding that terminology. So it says here, find the coordinates of J. If K is -1, 2, and that is the midpoint of the line segment JL, and L has the coordinates 3, -5. So basically, you're trying to find an end point. You're not trying to find the midpoint this time. Okay? So the first step is to substitute the information you are given into the midpoint formula. So remember, the midpoint formula is finding the average of the x values and the average of the y values. So I'm going to go ahead first is to label our points. And I'm going to say that my endpoint at the top here is going to be my x1, y1. And my second point is here at the bottom, L, and I'm going to say that's my x2, y2. Now I know that. Remember, we label first, then we can plug it into the formula. Remember, we always divide by 2. So we're going to go ahead and say, hey, I don't know what x1 is. That's what we're looking for. So I'm going to plug it in as an unknown, x1. And I got to add it to my x2. But I know my x2 is 3. So I'm going to go ahead and say it's 3. Now, for the y values, I don't know what my y1 is, so I'm going to just say I don't know what that is. And my y2 is a -5. Because it's a -5, I'm going to go ahead and put it in parentheses because you don't want two symbols right next to each other. Now, I know my midpoint, right? So this should equal the midpoint because this is the midpoint formula. So the midpoint is -1, 2. So we set it equal to something because in this case, we know the midpoint. We're trying to find one of the endpoints. So after setting it up, we can write two equations to find the coordinates of J. So my first equation is going to be the x values, and we know that my x values here should equal my x values of the midpoint. So that's how I choose my two equations. I can say that x1 plus 3 over 2 should equal my x value for my midpoint, which is a -1. From here, we can solve for x, and I'm not going to go through the process of solving for x, but we know that this should give me x1 should be -5. And so this is one of my coordinates. And now we can set the other equation, which was to find my y values. So what's a negative times a positive? It's a negative, so I'm going to go ahead and change this plus sign to a negative because right here we have a -5 times the plus sign, which means it's a -5 now. Over 2 equals the 2. So now this is my second equation, putting those two together. And that's going to be 2 there. And to solve it, you would have to solve for y1, and y1 is going to be 9 after you go through that process. So my final answer is not just going to be these two random numbers, right? We're trying to find a point. So the coordinates of point J are going to be -5, 9. And this is going to be your final answer. Okay, hope that helps.